Hello and welcome to Beyond the Pages, a Blackstone Library podcast. I'm your host, Rich Pfeiffer. Today we're going to talk about youth services at the Blackstone Library. Joining me today we have Emily Yates, who's the Associate Librarian for Youth Services, and Nicolette Pavane, Children's Librarian. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi, thank you.
Glad to have you here. So let's start with a bit of a 10,000-foot view. So what exactly is youth services at the Blackstone?
Yeah, so in the Youth Services Department, we serve patrons ages 0 to 18. And so we offer a lot of programming for children and teens in that age group. And we also have a really great book and resource collection for those patrons as well. We also serve their caregivers as well.
That's excellent. I had a chance to visit youth services over the weekend, and I really liked how it was laid out. I liked how on one side you had the teen section, and on the other side you had books for the younger children. So I wanted to start with the younger side. So can you tell me a little about the story times that you do?
Absolutely. So we have story times about 5 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and sometimes on Saturdays. We target different age groups starting at age 0 up to about age 5. And they're a really great way to start developing those early literacy skills. We do some songs with singing and movement. We read a story. We have props involved that help with those motor skills. And we also read a story, of course.
Oh, that's excellent. Also, there's a really wonderful mural over there, right? I did notice that. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, we were lucky to have a local artist come paint a mural for the youth services room.
Awesome. And then moving over to the teen side, are there any kind of interesting events that are coming up for the teen section?
Yeah, so we have a good variety of exciting one-time events for teens, and then we also have some recurring programs. So I'll start by talking a little bit about recurring programs. We have 2 teen volunteer groups. We have a junior teen advisory group and a teen advisory group for high school and middle school. And those groups meet once a month and they get volunteer hours for attending and they do different projects for us in the library. One special event that we have coming up this week is a Valentine's Day cookie pop decorating event. So we do a lot of food-based programs in the teen program because that tends to be a draw. But we love to do different craft programs as well, video games, all kinds of things for the teens. So there's a good mix of some recurring programs where teens can really get involved and then some one-time programs.
And I noticed over on the teen side, the books are organized by subject rather than Dewey Decimal, right?
Yeah, so the teen fiction section used to be just organized alphabetically by the author's last name. Based on feedback from the teens that we have in our program, we decided to what's called genreify the collection. So we went through the fiction section and labeled every book by genre. So there's fantasy, sci-fi, romance, horror, realistic fiction, historical fiction, and mysteries. And we've pulled those sections out and labeled them so they're all really easy to browse. And we've definitely seen an increase in circulation since we've done that project because it makes things a lot easier for people to find. And it makes it easier for us to make great book recommendations. If we already know that someone really loves fantasy, we can lead them to the right spot.
So that hints on to the next question I was going to ask about giving book recommendations. So can you give a little story about how you do that?
Yeah, I love giving recommendations to anybody who asks for it. When you're working with kids, it sometimes looks a little bit different than when you're working with adults, especially if they're younger children, because they might not be able to articulate what exactly they're looking for. So especially if they're younger, some of the ways that we do it is you might ask them, what else have you read before? And one of the first steps that we're going to do when we're figuring out what books to suggest would be to determine what reading level they're at, what age they're reading, what type of book to suggest. Because in the children's room, we start with everything from board books to picture books to really skinny chapter books all the way to full-length chapter books. So you kind of have to determine what level they're at, and then you determine what topic they're going to be interested in, what books would actually fit them. So it is a multi-step process, which is very different from when you're suggesting things to an adult.
So how about the teen section? How do you recommend for teens?
Yeah, I think recommending for teens is similar to what Nicolette described. I usually like to ask the teens what kinds of things they've enjoyed reading in the past and try to find something that's similar. Sometimes we get more reluctant readers in the teen section where maybe they're being required to read something for school, or they have a parent who comes in with them and says they want the teen to find a book. And when that happens, if someone expresses that maybe they are not a big reader and it's not something that they're super comfortable with, we can start by talking about what kinds of things they like to do outside of school, what kinds of TV shows are they watching, and try to find a connection there. We also have a really amazing graphic novel collection, both in the kids and the teen departments, and that sometimes is a really great way to get someone who might be a more reluctant reader into reading and into books, because there's so many great graphic novels, and the visual format might be more engaging for someone who struggles with reading. So those are all things that we might think about.
It's almost like a comic book, right? Where there's drawings, but there's also the words.
Yeah, and I think that graphic novels and publishing have really expanded a lot over the past decades. So whereas before it might be comic book type format, now there's graphic novels in all types of genres covering all kinds of topics. And there have been a lot of studies that have shown that they're really great for building vocabulary and visual literacy skills for kids. So there's a lot of benefits to them as well. It's a great option to have, to recommend.
I also imagine with teens, some of them get really into a series of books, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different series out that they get excited about, looking for the next one. So that's pretty cool too, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's always exciting when someone's found something that they're interested in and that they're like committed to continuing to read in this series. That's always great.
So I wanted to move on a little bit to some of the more interesting things that I haven't seen at some libraries, which are cool, like the 3D printer. So can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, so we have a 3D printer in the Youth Services Department. It is free for our patrons to use. I offer quarterly a 3D printing training mostly geared towards kids and teens. And during that training, we'll have the 3D printer running. We'll talk about the basics of 3D printing and why people use 3D printing out in the world. And we will end by having the teens and kids work on a software program where they can actually design their own 3D files to be printed on our printer. We also often have people who aren't designing their own objects but are finding them online, and then we're printing them for them. The only limitations we have is we can't run our printer overnight, so objects have to be able to be printed within a 10-hour window. But yeah, it's free for people to use, and it's a really great resource and great for the kids too, because often they're learning 3D design in school, things like that. It's cool for them to be able to see that come to life.
One other thing, and this I had no idea until I found out about, but video games at the library. So can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit, and then Nicolette's also doing a program, so I'll pass it over to you.
Awesome.
So we didn't have any video games at the library when I started. I met with a couple other librarians who work with teens in the area, and that's one thing that they really recommended that we look into. Right now, our video game collection is just Nintendo Switch games, so that's the only platform that we have. But we have a growing collection of video games that are available for checkout for our patrons. But then about once a quarter, I run a video game tournament for teens, usually Super Smash Bros. And it's a lot of fun. A lot of kids come out. And Nicolette is going to do one for kids as well.
Yeah, so I had a lot of kids being like, I like Super Smash Brothers. Why can't I go to that?
That's
And
awesome.
I was like, well, that's rated for teens, but we could do something with the kids. So we're going to have a Mario Kart program coming up in the spring. So it's not going to be a tournament. It's just going to be some free play, but we're going to have snacks and Mario Kart, and it should be a lot of fun.
Sounds like a lot of fun, yeah. So one other thing, we talked about video games, but what about things like board games and stuff? Do you have those?
So we were lucky to receive a grant this past year in partnership with Traveling Toys, which is a local organization. It was funded by the Branford Community Foundation and the Branford Rotary Club. And we were able to purchase a toy library and a game library. The board games are on the teen side. We have a board game library with lots of different options for people to check out. And then we were also able to create, with those funds, a toy library where toys are able to be checked out for 3 weeks. It's been really popular, especially with grandparents who are babysitting grandchildren and might not have toys in their home, but would like to take one home for the kids to play with. So that's been a really amazing resource that we have in the kids department as well.
So as far as the toy library, what age groups does that cover?
We have toys birth through, I would say, age maybe 8. And then other things maybe would be more interesting in the teen room for board games for the older kids.
And related to the board games, I also noticed that you have a recurrent Dungeons and Dragons.
We
playing
do,
group.
yeah. So once a month, we have a teen Dungeons and Dragons club. We're lucky to have a local person, Spencer, who has been DMing Dungeons and Dragons for a long time, and he comes in and runs the program for us. It's a lot of fun. The kids are really into it, and there's been a lot of growing interest in D&D recently, so it's been great to have at the library.
That's another thing I was a little surprised about. When I was younger, in the 80s, Dungeons and Dragons was just coming out, and it was very popular, and now it seems like it's coming back around, right?
Definitely. I think there's been renewed interest because of a couple different things, but there was the TV series Stranger Things, which introduced D&D back into popular culture. There's definitely been a renewed interest for sure.
That's awesome. Another thing I wanted to talk about was the Museum Pass program. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, absolutely. So we keep the museum passes in the youth services, but they're open to everybody, and they are discounted or free entry to different museums or zoos in the area. And we're very lucky to have them. We have a whole list available of what museums we offer.
How long can you check one out for?
It's usually a 24-hour or following day checkout so that everyone can get access. The great thing is about half of our passes are printable passes. So when you reserve that, you can actually go ahead and reserve that online. It emails you the printable pass, which you can actually just have on your phone and show the museum. So those you really don't need to worry about returning because they're just a one-day pass that gets sent to your email. The other portion are physical passes that you would pick up at the youth services desk, and those you would need to return the next day. But we have things like passes to the Beardsley Zoo, the Trolley Museum in East Haven. We've got the Florence Griswold Museum. There's a children's museum in West Hartford. So there's lots of different options, lots of cool things available. The great thing is, if you know you want to go to a particular museum in advance, you can go to our website and there's a spot where you can go ahead and make a reservation for those passes so that you know it will be available the day that you.
So one other interesting thing I noticed when I was touring the youth services area was about dropping a marble in when you get a book. Can you explain that?
Yeah, we have a big marble run in our area. It was donated to us a few years ago. And when kids check out a book, we give them a marble. And we find that it's a really good transition for them when they leave the library. They can get this marble, and it's a good way for them to know it's time to stop playing, time to leave the area. But they don't really know that. They just know it's time to get a fun marble, put it down, and walk out.
That's exciting. It must be like, oh, time to drop the marble before I leave, right?
It is, and we clap for them, and it's like a whole big deal.
See, that's great. It makes reading exciting for young people, right?
Absolutely. I think the marbles, you can come pick out a toy when you come to the library and check that out and take it home. You get books. You could do the story time. All of these together make the library a very exciting place for kids.
And it goes right along with the running theme of our podcast, which is beyond the pages. So libraries are more than just books, right? So that's awesome. One last question for both of you. What would you say to a young person to encourage them to visit the youth services area at the Blackstone?
I would say to a young person that we have something for you. No matter what you're interested in, what age you are, we have something for you. I know a young girl who comes here a lot, and she doesn't like reading. And that's okay. She comes to a ton of our events, and she says it's one of her favorite places to be because she's just really excited to come to some of the things that we offer, even though reading's not her thing. And it comes back to what we were just saying about beyond the pages. But even if maybe you don't have time to come to the events or that's not your thing, maybe you just want to come check out some of the video games. Maybe that's what you're interested in. But there is something for you here, and we'd love to have you come and explore and see what it is.
I would also just add that we have a really unique space in the teen room. Teens can come after school and hang out and just relax and spend time with their friends or read a book or work on homework, whatever they need to do. Obviously, the younger kids can come and use the playroom. So the space is a really unique thing to have in the community where you can access that for free. I think also Like Nicolette was saying, we have all these amazing resources that are available to people for free, along with all of these really cool programs. There's ways for everyone to get engaged and involved. And especially for the teens, there are a lot of opportunities to volunteer, which is a big thing that they need for their high school graduation requirements. So there's lots of ways that we can help meet people's needs when they come to the library.
So I want to thank Emily Yates, Associate Librarian for Youth Services, and Nicolette Pavane, who's a children's librarian here at the Blackstone, for joining me. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
And you've been listening to Beyond the Pages, a Blackstone Library podcast. I'm your host, Rich Pfeiffer, saying, come visit the library. Thank you.